The worst day of my life started with a broken coffee maker and ended with a knock on my door that changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened on that Tuesday in October 2021, you have to go back to a February night in 2003, when I was 22 years old, working the closing shift at a Waffle House off Route 9 in Clarksville, Tennessee. It was the kind of cold that gets into your bones, not the pretty winter postcard cold, the mean, wet kind that makes your fingers go numb even inside. I was the only waitress on after 9, which meant I was also the dishwasher, the host, and the person who had to explain to drunk college kids that we didn't serve alcohol. My tips that night had been $4 and a crumpled receipt someone used as a note that said "Great service," with 2 exclamation points, which I appreciated, but which did not pay my electric bill. Around 11:15, the door opened and a girl walked in. She looked about 16, maybe 17. She was wearing a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big, the kind of thing you wear when you've slept in it for several nights in a row. Her sneakers were soaked through. I could hear them squeak on the tile. She sat down in the corner booth, the one farthest from the window, and she just sat there. Didn't pick up a menu. Didn't look around. Just stared at the table like she was trying to disappear into it. I gave her a minute. Then I walked over. "What can I get you?" I asked. She looked up, and I saw her eyes were red. Not just a little red. The kind of red that comes from crying for a very long time and then trying to stop, and then starting again. "Just water," she said. "Please." I went and got her water. I also brought a plate of waffles, a side of scrambled eggs, and a little cup of syrup, and I set it all down in front of her without saying a word about it. She stared at the food for a second. Then she looked up at me. "I don't have any money," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I know," I said. "Eat." She ate everything. Every single thing on that plate. She ate like she hadn't in a while, which I suspected was the truth. I refilled her water twice and brought her a piece of pie I told her was left over from a customer, which was not true. I had paid for it out of my own tips, which again were $4 that night, so the math was not in my favor. But something about the way she was sitting in that booth, folded into herself like she was trying to take up as little space as possible in the world. I couldn't walk past that. When she finished, I cleared her plate and asked if she wanted more coffee. "No, thank you," she paused. "You didn't have to do that. It was going to get thrown out anyway," I said, which was mostly a lie. "I'm going to pay you back," she said. "I promise. I'm going to come back and pay you back. You don't have to. I want to." She looked at me directly then, and I remember thinking she had the kind of eyes that hold on to things. "What's your name, June?" I told her. "I'm going to remember that," she said. I watched her zip up her hoodie and walk back out into that cold, and I thought, I hope she finds somewhere warm tonight. Then I went back to wiping down the counter, and I let myself forget about it the way you let yourself forget about most things when you're 22 and tired and just trying to get through the week. That was February 2003. I didn't think about that night for a long time after. Life got big and loud and consuming the way it does. I moved to Nashville in 2005. I met my husband. We got married in 2009 in his mother's backyard with 100 people and a cake that leaned slightly to the left. I had my son in 2011 and my daughter in 2013. I opened my own place, a small diner on Meridian Avenue, in 2014, which nearly gave me a heart attack in its first year, and then quietly, steadily became the thing I was most proud of in my entire life. We called it June's. My husband said it was self-indulgent. I said it was efficient. For 7 years, that diner was everything. It was mine in a way that very few things feel like they're truly yours. I knew every regular by name, knew their orders before they sat down, knew whose kid was in a school play and whose back was acting up again. Mrs. Peterson, who came in every Thursday and ordered the same chicken salad sandwich, who told me once that it reminded her of the sandwiches her mother used to make. Old Pete, who drove 20 minutes just for our peach cobbler and always tipped an exact change and one scratched lotto ticket, which never won anything, but which I appreciated on principle. And then my sister-in-law came into the picture. I want to be careful how I say this, because she is my husband's sister, and I do not think she is an evil person. I think she is a person who loves money more than she loves most other things, and who had been waiting for the right moment to act on that love in a way that affected my life. She had always wanted the steak in the diner. I had always said no. What changed in 2020 was that the pandemic nearly destroyed us. I'm not being dramatic, I mean it nearly destroyed us, the way it destroyed so many small restaurants across this country. We survived on curbside and a PPP loan and the goodwill of regulars who bought gift cards they didn't need just to keep us afloat. But we came out of it carrying debt we hadn't carried before. My husband, who was a good man but not a particularly confrontational one, suggested that accepting his sister's offer might help us stabilize. His sister offered to invest a significant amount, enough to cover our outstanding debt and fund some renovations, in exchange for a 40% ownership stake. I said no. She adjusted the offer. I said no again. And then things started happening that I didn't understand until much later. A health inspection that cited us for violations that weren't there when I'd done my own walkthrough the week before. A review on Yelp from an account with no other reviews that described finding a hair in the soup, which had never happened in 7 years. A rumor, I still don't know how it started, that we were closing down, which caused 3 of our regular wholesale suppliers to get squirrely about our accounts. I found out later that my sister-in-law had a friend at the county health department. I found out later that the Yelp account was registered to an email address that traced back to someone she knew. I found out a lot of things later that made me feel like the floor had dropped out from under me. Not because I was surprised that people could do things like that, but because it was being done to something I had built with my own hands, my own years, my own 5 a.m. mornings and late night inventory counts, and the particular kind of love you pour into a place that you've made. By September 2021, I was out of options. The debt had compounded. My lawyer said we could fight, but fighting would cost money I didn't have. The bank wasn't interested in restructuring again. My accountant, who had been doing my books since I opened and who delivered the news like it was causing him physical pain, told me that the most practical thing was to close before we went further under. I set a date, October 19, 2021, my last day of business. I didn't tell the regulars until 2 weeks out. Mrs. Peterson cried, which made me cry, which made 2 of my servers cry, and then old Pete came in and we had to go through the whole thing again. I stayed professional about it mostly, or at least I tried to, in the way you try to hold yourself together when you're in public, and what you actually want to do is sit on the floor of your walk-in cooler and just let the cold hold you for a while. The night before, I went in alone after closing, and I walked around the whole place. Just walked around. Touched the counter. Looked at the menu board I'd hand-lettered myself back in 2014. That was still hanging there even though I'd repainted everything else twice since then. I sat in the corner booth, the one farthest from the window, for a while, which I didn't realize until I was already sitting there had been a deliberate choice. October 19 started normally, if you can call anything about that day normal. I'd been getting emails and calls all week from other local restaurant owners and neighbors, a lot of people I hadn't talked to in years, which was kind and which made it harder. My husband offered to be there, but I told him to take the kids to school and go to work because I didn't want them to see me fall apart. And I knew I was going to fall apart at some point. The morning rush was quieter than usual and also more full, which sounds like a contradiction, but it wasn't. There were more people, they were all just being more gentle about everything, like they were at a funeral, and trying not to say the obvious thing. My server, a college kid named Eli who had been with me for 2 years and who I genuinely hoped would do something great with his life, kept his head down and kept working, and I loved him for it. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was running mostly on coffee and the specific adrenaline that comes from pure stubbornness. That was when the door opened. 2 women walked in. They were somewhere in their 30s, I thought, professionally dressed. One in a blazer, one in a long coat, and behind them, a man in a suit carrying a soft leather briefcase that had the particular look of something that costs more than my car payment. My first thought was that they were from the bank. My second thought was that today of all days, I did not have the reserves for that conversation. I watched Eli go over to seat them, and I watched the woman in the blazer say something to him, and then Eli looked at me across the room with an expression I couldn't quite read, and he said, "June, they asked for you specifically." I walked over. "Are you June Talloway?" the woman in the blazer asked. She had a kind face, I noticed. Not the face of someone delivering bad news, though I had been wrong about that before. "I am," I said. "My name is Dara," she said. "And this is my sister Lena. We're looking for the woman who worked at the Waffle House off Route 9 in Clarksville, Tennessee, February 2003. Closing shift." The room seemed to get quieter, though I knew that was just my brain doing something strange with the sound. That was me, I said. The woman named Dara looked at her sister, and her sister Lena looked at me with those eyes that hold on to things. I knew her, not immediately, not in a flash. It was slower than that, more like watching a photograph develop. The image coming into focus slowly enough that by the time I recognized her, I had already started to cry. I told you I'd come back, Lena said. I had to sit down. She had been 17 that night in 2003. She had left home 6 days earlier, she told me now, sitting across from me in the same booth where I'd served her waffles 18 years ago. Not the same booth, obviously. Different diner, different state. But somehow it felt like the same booth. She had left because her stepfather had been making her home unsafe in ways I won't describe in detail, and she had grabbed her bag and her savings, which were $43, and she had started walking, and by February 7th, she was in Clarksville, Tennessee, and she had not eaten a real meal in 36 hours. After that night, she'd found a shelter. From the shelter, she'd connected with a youth services organization that helped her get back into school. She graduated high school in 2004, a year late. And then she worked 2 jobs for 4 years and put herself through community college. She transferred to UT Knoxville. She graduated in 2011. She went to law school. She graduated in 2011. She went to law school. She graduated in 2014. She had been looking for me since 2015, she said. She'd tried to find the Waffle House on Route 9 first, but I had moved on by then, and the staff had turned over, and there weren't records that would help. She'd hired a private investigator in 2019 who had traced me to Nashville, to the diner, and then the pandemic hit, and she'd worried the whole time that she would be too late. She'd driven from Cincinnati that morning. She and Dara had left at 5 a.m. When we saw the sign, she said, the sign I'd put up in the window, closing permanently. Thank you for 7 beautiful years. I thought maybe we were too late, and then Dara said maybe we were too late, and then Dara said maybe we just made it. The man with the briefcase, it turned out, was not from a bank. He was Lena's colleague, a lawyer, like her. And what he had in that briefcase, what he set on the table in front of me while I was still trying to understand what was happening, was a cashier's check and a set of documents. You saved my life, Lena said, not metaphorically. I don't know what would have happened if I'd had to walk back out into that cold with nothing. I don't want to think about it. And I know I know this isn't a transaction. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I have been trying for years to find a way to do something that was actually proportional to what you did for me, and I couldn't figure out what that looked like until I heard what was happening with your diner. She had paid off my outstanding debt in full. Every dollar. And the documents. They were a business grant from a nonprofit she had helped establish 3 years earlier, specifically for women-owned small food service businesses facing financial hardship. I was not a charity case, she explained carefully, reading my face. I would be the grant's 3rd recipient. The process was legitimate, reviewed by a board, and I met every criterion. I tried to say I couldn't accept it. Dara leaned forward and said, very gently, June, she's been carrying this for 18 years. Please let her put it down. I looked at Lena. I just gave you dinner, I said. My voice didn't come out right. You gave me dinner when I had nothing, she said. And you didn't ask me anything. You didn't ask where I was from or what had happened or whether I deserved it. You just fed me and let me sit somewhere warm. I don't remember exactly what I said after that. I know I signed the documents because they exist and my name is on them. I know that Eli, who had absolutely been listening from behind the counter, disappeared into the kitchen and came back out with 3 plates of food because he said he thought everyone needed to eat something. I know that we stayed there for almost 2 hours talking. I learned that Lena now works with a legal advocacy organization that helps minors in unsafe home situations, that Dara is a high school counselor in Cincinnati, that Dara had been the one, actually, who had helped track me down in the final stretch. She had found an old Nashville Scene article about the diner from 2017 and had found my name in it. I know that when they finally stood up to leave, I walked them out to the parking lot, and Lena turned around and hugged me for a long time, and I let her. And neither of us said anything, and that felt like the exact right thing. I reopened June's in March 2022. Same location, new lease, renovated kitchen. I kept the hand-lettered menu board. Mrs. Peterson came in on opening day. She ordered the chicken salad sandwich. She said it tasted exactly the same, which I took as the highest compliment. Old Pete brought a lotto ticket. It didn't win. I framed it anyway. It's behind the counter now, right next to a photo I have from that day in October. It's not a particularly beautiful photo. You can see I've been crying, but Lena is looking straight at the camera and you can see it in her face. That thing she mentioned, the thing she'd been carrying, it's gone. I think about that February night sometimes when I'm closing up alone, about how 22-year-old me spent $4 on a plate of food for a stranger and felt, honestly, a little guilty about it because I needed that $4. About how I didn't have any way of knowing what that stranger was carrying, or what she would carry forward from that night, or what she would build with her life, or that she would drive 9 hours round trip on a Tuesday morning 18 years later, because she had promised a girl she never forgot that she would come back. I don't think I did anything remarkable. I think I just did the next right thing, the obvious thing, the thing that was right in front of me. There's a girl sitting in the cold and she's hungry and you have food. That's not heroism. That's just arithmetic. But I've been thinking, lately, about all the moments that don't come back, all the small things we do without knowing they're going to matter, the conversations we don't remember having, the doors we hold open without looking back, the times we treat a stranger like they're worth treating well, for no reason except that they are. We don't always get to know what becomes of those moments. Most of the time they just disappear into the world and we never hear from them again. But sometimes, just sometimes, they come back to you on the last day, walk through your door, and they're already smiling before you recognize them, because they've known your face for 18 years. I keep coming back to the arithmetic of it. $4. 1 plate of waffles, 1 side of eggs, 1 slice of pie I told a stranger was going to be thrown out anyway. That was the whole transaction, the one I didn't even remember making. The one that came back to me 18 years later and gave me my life back. I don't think the universe keeps a ledger. I don't think that's how any of this works. But I do think that who you are in the small moments, the ones nobody sees, the ones where there's no reward coming and no audience watching, that's the thing that compounds over time. I was 22 years old and tired and underpaid, and I saw someone who needed food, and I had food, so I gave it to her. That's not a moral calculation. That's just what decent looks like when it's quiet. What I think about now is Lena, not the version of Lena who walked into my diner in October 2021 in a blazer with a lawyer beside her. The version who was 17 years old and had been walking for days and sat down in the corner booth and said I don't have any money like she was confessing to something. She didn't ask for help. She just stated a fact and waited to see what the world would do with it. And then she spent 18 years building something from that night. Not because I did anything extraordinary, I really didn't, but because she decided to. She finished high school a year late and worked 2 jobs and put herself through college and then law school and then built a nonprofit that helps other kids in the same situation she was in. That is not my doing. That is entirely hers. What she built came from her own intelligence, the kind that doesn't quit when things get hard, that keeps finding the next door to walk through even when the previous one closed. And it came from a stubbornness I recognized immediately when she sat across from me that Tuesday afternoon. The same stubbornness I'd seen in her face when she was 17 and broke, and still managed to say I'm going to come back and pay you back like it was already decided. The thing that gets me is the timing. She had been looking for me since 2015. She found me eventually because she kept looking, because she had decided that following through on a promise mattered, even a promise she'd made to a waitress she'd never see again, even when nobody would have known or blamed her for letting it go. That kind of integrity, the kind you maintain when no one is watching, is the rarest thing I know. I think about my own kids when I think about all of this, about what I want them to understand before they're old enough to be the person standing behind a counter deciding whether to see a stranger or look away. I don't have a speech. I don't really do speeches. But I think I want them to know that being good and being smart and being willing to keep going when everything falls apart, those things are not separate. They work together. Lena is proof of that. She survived on her own wits. She built something real with her mind, and she never lost the thread of who she wanted to be. And all of it, every bit of it, started from a decision she made in a cold parking lot at 17 to not give up. And I was just the woman who gave her waffles and told her to eat. That plate of food didn't save her. She saved herself. But maybe it gave her 1 warm hour in which to decide to try. I think about that a lot, on the nights I'm closing up alone. How much a single warm hour can do for a person who's running on empty. And I try to remember that the next time I'm tired and underpaid and someone sits down in a booth and looks at the table like they're trying to disappear,